Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the president of the George C. Marshall Foundation, Mr. Brian Shaw.
Good afternoon. Please be seated. Good afternoon, and thank you all for being here. Would you please join me in a round of applause for Amy McCabe, who delivered that spirited rendition of the national anthem? It is an honor to be with you today as part of the celebration of the life and career of General Gordon Sullivan. You will hear more later in the program from those who have worked with General Sullivan and who have known him over the years and know why he is so richly deserving of the Goodpaster Award. I want to thank the individuals and businesses whose generous financial support has made this event possible. They help sustain the important and ongoing programs of the Marshall Foundation. They're listed in your program at your places. In particular, I want to thank and acknowledge our friends from General Dynamics and L3 Communications for their leadership and support, not only of this event, for all Marshall Foundation programs. The Marshall Foundation sustains and promotes the values of George Catlett Marshall. In our library, archives, and museum, we provide a firm foundation for research on every major event of the first half of the 20th century, which Henry Luce so aptly called the American century. Yet the Marshall Foundation does more than research. We offer programs in contemporary leadership education and international affairs. As we experience these current periods of unprecedented change around the world, especially in the Middle East, the Marshall Foundation, along with its international program partner, the Stimson Center, seeks to educate and inform the ongoing conversations about the most important international issues of our time, always keeping in mind the timeless values of General Marshall and the enduring lessons of the Marshall Plan. I'm pleased today to acknowledge some very special people in the crowd. One of our long-term programs at the Marshall Foundation is our Marshall Army ROTC Award Seminar. For 35 years and in partnership with the U.S. Army, the Marshall Foundation has convened a seminar in Lexington, Virginia on national security and defense issues. To that symposium are invited the top ROTC cadets from every unit around the country. This year we had 270 in April at our event, and we have now helped to honor, train, and educate more than 10,000 future leaders of the Army. We are pleased to have a group of former Marshall Award winners here with us today who want to help us pay honor and tribute to General Sullivan. So I would ask those award winners to please stand up and be recognized. I'd also like to recognize Roger Sullivan, who is with us here today. Roger is General Goodpaster's son-in-law and is here representing the Goodpaster family. Thank you for being here, Roger. It is now my privilege to introduce and welcome our Master of Ceremonies, Martha Raddatz, Senior Foreign Affairs Correspondent for ABC News. Ms. Raddatz is one of the most respected journalists of our time. Her extensive coverage of international affairs, including dozens of trips to the Middle East in peace and in war, has given viewers around the world the benefit of her insightful and also often exclusive reporting. Ms. Raddatz is a Peabody Award winner and a two-time Emmy Award winner. And next month, she will receive the Fred Friendly First Amendment Award from Quinnipiac University. Catherine Bigelow, who directed the Oscar Award-winning film The Hurt Locker, said of Ms. Raddatz, "In a 10-minute conversation, Martha will break your heart with stories of children living in rural Afghanistan. She will inspire you with tales of frontline heroism, and she'll make you laugh uncontrollably with her observations about the stylishness of scarves and body armor." It's not something I know anything about. She has also brought the human element of our military service men and women and their families into our homes and to our lives. Her highly acclaimed book, A Long Road Home, is a detailed account of the effects of war on soldiers and their families. I found it to be one of the most compelling books I've ever read. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Martha Raddatz.
Thank you so much. I'm truly grateful and honored to have covered our nation's military for the past 20 years. I'm grateful to be standing in front of this truly distinguished audience full of many legends in my life and so many friends. And I'm especially grateful to be honoring the man who I have so long admired, Gordon Sullivan. The Goodpaster Award honors the life and service of General Andrew Goodpaster, a longtime trustee and a chairman of the Marshall Foundation, a champion of the Marshall legacy, and an American hero who spent an extraordinary 4 decades as a soldier and a statesman. This award is presented to American business leaders, politicians, military leaders, and others who have served the nation in exemplary ways, who, like General Goodpaster, exhibited great courage, selfless service, patriotism, and leadership in their lives and careers. General Sullivan is that same kind of leader, tireless, fearless, selfless, and humble. From his long career in the U.S. Army, eventually serving as the 32nd Chief of Staff, to his 15-year role as President of the Association of the United States Army. We will hear many tributes to this fine man today. I want to give you a brief personal one of my own. When I first started covering the Pentagon in 1993, I had exactly 0 experience with the military. I truly knew no one in the military. I'd had nothing in my background. But Gordon Sullivan helped make me the reporter I am today. He mentored me, he took time with me, he explained things to me. He never criticized if stories didn't turn out the way maybe he thought they should turn out, as long as they were fair. I traveled around with General Sullivan. I remember it really was a long time ago, because when I think about it, I had just had a baby, and my 6'1" son is now going to be a quarterback in college. So that puts it into perspective. But I remember going down to Fort Benning with him. It was a time of relative peace for this country, and I heard him talk to his soldiers. And I am not a big weeper, let's say, but I remember just having tears in my eyes when I heard that speech and the motivation, and I thought, this man is what a leader should be. This is a man who inspires these soldiers, who inspires so many. And I took it back and I aired that story, and I happened to be working at NPR at the time. And when that story aired, and I looked around and saw the tears in everyone's eyes, and those were tears also of people who didn't really know much about the military. But he made it mean something, not just to his soldiers, but to everyone he touched. He brought me not only into the lives of the military and opened up that world to me and took me on every exercise or whatever I could possibly see. He opened his dear family to me, and I did as well. His dear wife, Gay, who has the funniest stories about traveling with His Majesty, about them rolling out the red carpets when they would go to foreign countries, and Gay kind of bringing up the rear there, trying to keep up with them, and they'd roll up the red carpet before she even got on it, when we all know that Gay should have been the one wearing the crown. So I thank them for years of friendship, years of mentoring. I always tell people when I talk to media panels, and there's always the question of, you guys do a terrible job, and we get really stupid people who come along and they know nothing about the military. And I say, every one of you should learn a lesson from General Sullivan about that. Take that young reporter in, teach that young reporter about sacrifice and service, tell them your story, and someday you'll have a young reporter who's an old reporter standing up before you who knows and feels proud of the work that I have done to represent in so many ways the United States military. General Sullivan also introduced me to a wonderful friend of his, Rear Admiral Richard Snyder, who is president of Norwich University, which proudly carries the tradition of soldier citizens and has since 1819. That is where General Sullivan received his college education and where I happened to receive an honorary degree in 2009. I was there with General Sullivan and President Schneider at Norwich when I got the call that my daughter had gotten engaged, so it was sort of a special memory for me as well. General Sullivan continues his involvement as chairman of the board and has a very close relationship with President Schneider, who will tell us more about General Sullivan in this video. Please watch and listen.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Rich Schneider, and I'm the president of Norwich University in Northfield, Vermont, where General Gordon R. Sullivan is our chairman of the board and is a proud member of the class of 1959. Gordon, congratulations on your wonderful award today, and I'm really disappointed I can't be there in person to celebrate with you, but I'm delighted that the Marshall Foundation is honoring you today and letting me join you through this great use of technology. Gordon's relationship started with Norwich on February 5th, 1955, when he and his mother received an acceptance letter to Norwich University while they were living in Quincy, Massachusetts. To say that he was excited is probably an understatement. But his special relationship with Norwich started on that day and then through his entire 4 years here at school. Now, Gordon was a rook in 1955 and stayed a buck private his entire 4 years at the university. None of his classmates would have ever assumed that he would have risen to the ranks of the Chief of Staff of our Army. But one thing they did say about him is he was a great man, very smart, and that he would do well and succeed in business, not in the United States Army. And his relationship and the foundation that he acquired here has served him so well, as he will tell you himself, throughout his entire course of his Army career and now continuing to support soldiers as the president of the Association of the United States Army. I love it when he talks to our students. He talks about his time as a cadet, what he learned in the mess hall as he worked his way through school, and the fact that he and his mom ran out of money as he was rising to his senior year. And one of his classmates, part of that incredible Norwich family, countersigned a note to the Northfield Savings Bank for $787. That got him through his degree at Norwich. Becoming a second lieutenant in our Army, having been a very good student in ROTC, he paid off the note in the year. That relationship that started with school, with his classmates, whom he still stays connected with, some of them every week on the phone or in person, that relationship has made Gordon Sullivan the man he is today, and he'd be the first one to tell you. Gordon, you are the embodiment of Norwich and her values. I will tell you this is true. You always try, and our motto, of course, is I will try. I love it when you quote, not for themselves, but for their country, because that's you. When I hear those words, the first thing I think about is you and your service to our country. You have lived those values that Norwich and your mom gave you right from the very beginning, of selfless service, courage, tenacity, honesty, loyalty, faithfulness, all those things. You have never, ever failed us. And for that, we hold you in our highest regard of a man with great character and great leadership. Gordon, I so value our private time together as president and chairman. Whether it's at my breakfast table getting ready for a board meeting or when we're walking across the upper parade ground going to parades put on by the regiment. But one of my favorite times was when we were both walking down the steps as you saw your name for the first time across the archway of the Sullivan Museum, which was given to us by a wonderful gift by a trustee, Jim Pritzker. I know you seeing your name took your breath away. And you are such a humble guy. What you said was, I don't deserve this, Rich. Let me tell you, you do deserve this, Gordon. You do. And you deserve this award given by the Marshall Foundation, the Goodpaster Award, because you are courageous. You are a great leader and a patriot. You've been a remarkable person at Norwich for your entire time. Yes, I know school did a lot for you as a young rook and as a cadet. We made you a great officer. You became an unbelievable leader. And now you're giving back, and you're having that same profound impact on our students today, for which we will forever be grateful. But we can't think of a better guy to receive this award, and I couldn't be more proud of you or more thankful for your leadership and the role that you have had in strengthening our Army and in perfecting this republic. We salute you, Gordon. We're very proud of you.
That was a wonderful tribute. I just want to follow up on the humble part, because just before I came up, General Sullivan leaned over to me and he said, "Look at that. Can you believe my name is up there with Goodpaster and Marshall? There's something wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with that." He so deserves this award, and you deserve to have lunch and great conversation, and we'll see you afterwards. Thanks. Go ahead, keep eating that dessert. Our next speaker is highly regarded as one of the principal architects of the trained and ready U.S. Army. General Carl Vano is a 1957 graduate of West Point. He served the nation with distinction for more than 34 years, culminating in his tenure as the Army's 31st Chief of Staff, leading Operation Just Cause in Panama and Desert Storm. He was succeeded by General Sullivan, who served as his vice chief. General Vano has retired recently after many years' service as president of MPRI and senior executive and an officer of L3 Communications Services Group. Here to pay tribute to one of his good friends, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome General Carl Vano.
First of all, thanks very much for having me spend a few minutes talking about my buddy of about 5 decades. As a matter of fact, when we first met, we both had black wavy hair. The problem is I lost mine because of him. But I want to spend a few minutes talking about what a great soldier and statesman Gordon Sullivan is. But before I do, I'm going to take some license here. And I'm going to make a couple of comments about a person in the audience who's going to be very upset with me when I finish. When you get to be my age, you don't care about that. Martha alluded to Gay Sullivan. Now, Gay Sullivan is a real hero in the Sullivan family. She has been, over the years, Gordon's best friend and toughest critic. And I can attest to that for the last number of years. But she's always been there with him, both in peace and war. And so I want to take the opportunity to recognize Gay and say, Gay, thanks a lot. Now, I want to correct the record on Admiral Snyder's great talk about Gordon. Truth was, he did graduate as a clean sleever, which means he was a cadet private, because he got himself in a little jam up there that we won't talk about here. However, in 1989, we sent him out. He was commanding the Big Red 1 Division. So they invited him back to Norwich to give a leadership talk, and he did. And of course, he had him in tears, and he had him cheering and all the rest of that. But at the end of that, the president at the time, Russ Todd, got up and presented Sully with a two-striper, making him a sergeant in Norwich Corps. Now, Sully's beloved mother was there in the audience. So Gordon, walking off the stage, raised up and he said, "See, Mom, I wasn't a failure." So the other point that Martha raised about Gordon, about his ability to excite a crowd when he gives a speech. Now, he's spoken before thousands of people, but I always maintain, if you have three folks and you want to have a speech, call Sully, and he will fly wherever you're at to give that speech. But I want to talk a little bit about Sully, the soldier, the statesman, and one of the best of the 21st century. Now, you all know Sully, many of you, through the brilliant leadership that he's given to the Association of the United States Army. But I've known Sully, as I said, for many, many years, and I've had the great pleasure of watching him extend through the Army the values that he lived by for his nearly 40 years in the uniform of the American soldier. Now, I want all of you to take a good look at Sully. Okay? Here he is. He's a picture of calm, balance, and deliberation. But beware, for appearances can be very deceiving, because indeed, beneath his deceptively polished Bostonian demeanor, there boils a man of daring, imagination, initiative, and great vigor, seasoned with a sly sense of humor. In 1978, I had the privilege of being the assistant division commander of the Big Red 1, the 1st Infantry. And we hired as a G3, the operations officer, bald-headed Gordon Sullivan, who was a lieutenant colonel. And he was amazing in his ability to take a raw concept and turn it into an operation. And his famous saying was, "Okay, I got all that. Now we're going to turn theory into practice." And you don't do that with the kind of, you don't do that unless you have the kind of leadership, innovation, and good common sense that he's done. I've also seen up close and personal countless intellectual and policy opponents who, after being exposed to Sully's unique energy, emerged in complete agreement with him and vaguely wondered why they ever thought differently and why they ended up agreeing with him. And he's a master at that. I remember once, many years ago, when we both were in the uniform of the U.S. Army, in the early morning hours at Fort Myer, I passed Sully, who was jogging around the post. And I rolled down the window and I said, "Faster, Sully, faster." Those were probably the most needless advice I've ever spoken to anyone. For Sully started fast in his military career, and he has only accelerated ever since. Now, you all know, Sully graduated from Norwich and was commissioned in the Armor Corps, opting to be a tanker instead of a field artilleryman, which was perhaps the only mistake Gordon Sullivan made in his very distinguished career. And for nearly 4 decades, he served the American people with spirit and courage, and he's been instrumental in shaping America's armies today into the fighting force in our nation's history. His Army career reached its pinnacle when he was selected by the President to serve as the 32nd Chief of Staff of the Army. And as a leader, he followed in the footsteps of some of the giants of the 20th century, men such as George Marshall and Andy Goodpaster, whose award we're giving Sully today. Now, like Marshall, Sully confronted the challenges of transforming the Army, and the measure of his success is the Army of today that stands as America's most powerful strategic force for protecting our vital interests anywhere, anytime, and any place. And like Andy Goodpaster, Sully has blended his keen intellect with a great zeal, subordinate himself and his own personal interest to serve a greater cause than him. But of all the accolades that I believe that we can pay Gordon Sullivan, the one that I would bestow on him as his most enduring legacy is the American soldier and the men and women who lead our Army. And as one of our most accomplished presidents of AUSA, he has continued to serve those same soldiers and families on the battlefields of policy, budgets, health care, and education. But perhaps most importantly, he's brought our soldiers closer to the people that they serve. So, Sully, the award that we're going to give you today is a tribute to you and the Army that you helped forge through a lifetime of service. Congratulations on this prestigious award. I know that both Andy Goodpaster and Jordan Marshall will be both pleased and proud. Thank you.
Thanks so much, General Vono. General Vono and General Sullivan and I go out for periodic lunches to catch up on the world, and they're one of my favorite things that I do. So the two generals and a lady lunches, and they're always the two of them are, so what do you know? That's how they all start. Our next speaker has a different sort of relationship with General Sullivan. As chairman of AUSA's Council of Trustees, Nicholas Shabraya works alongside General Sullivan to support the many thousands of men and women who serve in the United States Army, bringing a voice to their interests while supporting all aspects of national security. Recently retired from a long career in service, much of it with General Dynamics, Mr. Shabraya served as CEO for 12 years, leading his company to enormous growth during that time. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Nick Shabraya.
Thank you, Martha. I'm pleased to be included in this tribute to Gordon Sullivan, really a great American and a personal friend. Like General Goodpaster, Gordon has been one of our Army's senior leaders whose leadership and soldiering skills have been broadly recognized and celebrated. You already know and have heard the elements and values of his leadership in and for our Army and its soldiers over his distinguished military career. My association with Gordon, however, began with his retirement from the Army. It was initially a business relationship within the defense industry, and then later a more professional bonding through shared interests in the Army, its soldiers, units, and families, with his leadership at the Association of the United States Army. We have been together at AUSA for almost 15 years. On a personal note, I recommended that he turn that job down. Fortunately, he didn't listen to his friend and instead dragged me along with him. But it has been a period of growth and transformation of an institution so important to the Army and therefore the nation. Sully's stewardship has been absolutely skillful and superb, and his business acumen very clear. But let me go to something else. One description of Gordon that is omitted from the biographical materials is that he is an impassioned visionary. He has provided vision on critical contemporary issues confronting America and the world. And it's been my privilege to see this up close at AUSA and in other places as well. But let me talk about one activity in particular. The Sullivan passion, creativity, and vision took hold in the creation of the Marshall Legacy Institute in 1997 on the 50th anniversary of the Marshall Plan. This, by the way, was with seed money from the George Marshall Foundation. The goal of the Institute was to honor and create an institution that fostered and served the principles and ideals of General Marshall, as demonstrated by his creation of the Marshall Plan in Europe. Seizing upon an existing humanitarian need in war-torn areas, General Sullivan developed this institute with a three-part program. First, a vital life and limb-saving operation focused on eradicating landmines and injury prevention through the use of highly trained dogs. Second, engaging American youth with their international peers to help solve humanitarian problems. And third, providing survivors assistance for landmine victims and their families. These programs have earned MLI International well-deserved praise and attention. Today, the Marshall Legacy Institute is engaged in 11 countries with 172 dogs employed by host country handlers. Countless lives and limbs have been saved. Millions of lives have been improved. Each beneficiary country has seen a small but significant humanitarian organization built with both local and national pride. I have witnessed this up close and have sponsored a dog personally. My former employer, General Dynamics, has sponsored nearly a dozen of these life-saving animals. But this is just one of many significant contributions that Gordon Sullivan, a soldier, practitioner of the profession of arms, and a skillful businessman, has made. In this instance, he has beaten the sword into a plowshare, except in this case it's footpads and tail wags and hugging dogs. This accomplishment through his vision and industry alone merits the recognition you give him here today.
Thank you so much. I learned a lot in that about General Sullivan. Lieutenant General Brent Scowcroft received the first Goodpaster Award in 2008 for his selfless devotion and service to the country he loves deeply. A former trustee of the Marshall Foundation, like his good friend and former colleague Andrew Goodpaster, Brent Scowcroft served as National Security Advisor to Presidents Gerald Ford and George H.W. Bush. His extraordinary 29-year military career began with graduation from West Point. I had to look that up because that didn't make sense to me, but okay. West Point, and included numerous assignments addressing long-range military planning, international relations, and national security issues during some very difficult times in our history. Today, he counsels leaders on security and planning. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Lieutenant General Brent Scowcroft.
Well, I must say, I start out very relieved because I was sure that Martha was going to introduce me. The last comment was, well, what do we do next in Syria? I am gilding the lily on this program. I can't imagine anything more that could be said about Gordon other than he walked across the Galilee Sea without getting his feet wet. But anyway, let me just say a little bit about him and about Andy Goodpaster. You know, as I went through what is now a very long career, I had three role models. Well, two sort of inspirations and one real role model. The first was President Eisenhower. The second was George Marshall. And the third was Andy Goodpaster. Now, the first two are obvious. Andy's not so obvious. And that's what strikes me about the aptness of giving the Goodpaster Award to Gordon Sullivan, because they are so very, very similar. Andy Goodpaster, there was no big flash about him. He just got the job done. Andy Goodpaster, and very few people know some of the things about him. For example, he was the first real national security advisor. Eisenhower had this elaborate NSC system, but it was mostly big machinery. The person in the White House who advised him was Andy Goodpaster. And later on, when Richard Nixon revised the NSC system, you know, it had gone from Eisenhower, this very elaborate structure, to practically disappearing under John F. Kennedy, other than for his NSC system was 5 people, and they just gave him what Andy Goodpaster had given to Eisenhower. Well, when Nixon came in, he called Goodpaster, and Goodpaster put those two systems together into an NSC system which did both. It provided the strategic guidance for the government, and it gave the president the advice he needed. Well, almost nobody knows about that. You know, Goodpaster was NATO commander for 2 terms. He was called back to active duty to deal with a scandal at West Point, and so on. But these are the kinds of things which, to me, made him a true role model. And I can't think of anyone more suited to stand in those shoes than Gordon Sullivan. Now, I only knew Gordon Sullivan as Chief of Staff, and that's when I met him. When he was Chief of Staff, we were watching the dissolution of the Cold War. And what did that mean to our force posture, what we'd done? I mean, we all were children of the Cold War. It was what motivated the whole of the U.S. national security structure. What do we do with it? Is the Soviet Union gone for good? Might they come back? If they're gone for good, what do we do? What's the next problem? What's the next threat? And Gordon, in his own quiet way, provided, and the best example I can give of the kind of advice he provided is that the president relied on him very deeply. And how we sort our way through it. Now, did we do everything at that time? No. But I think we managed to transition reasonably well. I was with President Bush 41 yesterday and told him what I was going to do today. His face lit up and he said, "Please tell Gordy how much I respect and admire him." So that's the man that we celebrate today. And I couldn't be more honored to have anyone else in his place having this wonderful award. Thank you, Gordy. And now if John Adams, the chair, would come up, we will proceed with the ceremony. John, thank you. General Sullivan, would you join us? As you know, the purpose of this meal today is to honor General Gordon Sullivan for his service to the nation and to the world. General Sullivan, in recognition of your selfless service to the country as Chief of Staff of the United States Army, as a member of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and for your leadership of the Association of the United States Army, your career and life embody courage, selflessness, patriotism, and dedicated leadership. It is my honor to present you with the Andrew J. Goodpaster Award for 2012.
Take a deep breath, gang. I have a script, and unlike myself, I'm going to stick with it because I am slightly overwhelmed by this entire event. Mr. Adams and Brian Shaw, I want to thank you and the board, General Scowcroft, for your support in this great honor. I'm going to say a little bit more about that in a minute. I want to acknowledge some people who are here. First of all, a great American soldier representing the U.S. Army, Active Guard and Reserve, General Lloyd Austin, Vice Chief of Staff of the Army. Lloyd's a great soldier, and we all know how busy you are, and the fact that you're here is a great honor. Thanks. General Scowcroft, I can't thank you enough for your kind words, and you've always been there when I had occasion to call, just as I know you've always been there for the armed forces of the United States and the men and women who go out each and every day, just doing their jobs. Thank you very much. We appreciate what you do and what you have done. General Carl Bono, my friend, 31st Chief of Staff of the Army, my friend and mentor and buddy, thank you. I'm going to say a few things about Gay later. Let me thank Martha Raddatz, Senior Foreign Affairs Correspondent for ABC News, one of the bravest people I know, one of the most courageous people I know. And Martha, you're wonderful, and you get right to the point, and you make your point, and you move on with a smile on your face, and you know how to get things out of a lot of guys who probably don't even want to talk. Good for you. Nick Shabraya, former chairman and CEO of General Dynamics, my chairman of AUSA. I don't think I could have done it without your support and your very soft, guiding hand. And I know why General Dynamics rocketed to the top of the hit parade with Wall Street. You know how to do it. I want to thank those companies registered here, not only General Dynamics, but L3 Communications and the other companies represented for their support of this lunch, and obviously for the support of the Marshall Foundation. And members of the board of the Marshall Foundation, some of whom are here today, many of whom are here today, and of course Mr. J. Adams, who is the chairman of that board. I want to thank you and them. I would be remiss if I didn't mention my longtime friend and mentor, General Julius Becton, Lieutenant General Julius Becton, a truly great American who is a World War II veteran, fought in the Korean War, entered the Army, by the way, at a time when racial issues were not handled very well in our country. You all know that story. But Julius Becton served in that Army in World War II. He served in Korea in a partially integrated unit in combat. Then he went on to serve in Vietnam as a commanding officer and commanded 7th Corps and the 1st Cavalry Division, 1st Team. General Becton, we're honored to have you with us. I don't know where you're sitting. I can't see with the lights. Thank you very much. And of course, to Rich Schneider, my comrade up in Norwich, the president. I know he's sorry he can't be here. He told me about 8 times, but he can. He had a family obligation which he couldn't break, and thanks to him. Now, to say I was astonished and speechless when Mr. Adams and Brian Shaw informed me I was to receive this award would be understating the case by a lot. The fact that the award was sponsored by the Marshall Foundation, and as I told Martha, you know, Goodpaster, Marshall, and General Scowcroft, I mean, there's 3 giants, 3 general officers who epitomize our profession. Marshal, Goodpaster, and Scowcroft rank at the very top. I want to acknowledge my debt to those whom I have served over the years, the American soldiers, and sailors, airmen, Marines, and members of the Coast Guard when I was one of the chiefs. They are the ones who actually, in many cases, made me look better than I really am and that I was. And I owe a lot to them and many of you in this room. And I want to thank all of those with whom I served. Now, she's probably going to crown me, but I'm going to do this anyway. My wife and I have been together for almost 50 years. We actually went to junior high school together in high school. We didn't go out with each other. I'm not going to give you all of that story, but that happened later. And I'm the guy who one night before we got married, who said, look, I'm a career soldier, and that's what I want to be. And that's almost 50 years ago now. And she had a choice. She chose to be with me and a way of life. And she's lived it with me since 1965. Now, my kids and my grandchildren, they didn't have a choice. I am what I am, and they were willing to put up with all of that, and they supported me and us, her and me, and I found solace in their comfort over the years, and I want to thank them for their love and their support as I received this award. None of this would have happened, I can tell you, without her. And she is, frankly, the grounding element in my life, and I am sure she will. Anyway, let me end there. It's humbling to accept this award, frankly. General Goodpaster emulated the life which I think many people aspire to. Service to nation was his life. And for me, it was exemplified when he was asked by General Bernard Rogers, who was at that time the Chief of Staff of the Army, to serve as the president or the superintendent of the United States Military Academy for the sole purpose of restoring the reputation of West Point. He did it. He epitomized selflessness. He literally came back from retirement, and he served with candor, courage, professionalism, and he had that indefinable characteristic known as character. Character counts. Decorated for valor and distinguished service, as well as admired by many for his ability to build consensus related to matters of national security at the highest levels of government, not only of the United States, but of our greatest alliance, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. He could do it inside the Army, too. For instance, as superintendent of West Point in the mid-'70s, when female cadets were slated to enter West Point as members of the class of 1976, he said, in the face of very vocal opposition, I will be the first to greet them, shake their hands, and welcome them to West Point. That defines leadership and character. He also spoke and wrote about the challenges of overcoming the worrisome gap between civil society and the military. He wrote, by the way, he wrote this in 1977 in a pamphlet with Samuel Huntington, who studied his whole life the relationship between civil society and the military. He wrote specifically that society must identify the military as an inherent specialized component essential to the well-being of our nation rather than as a burdensome competitive entity which endangers its sons and daughters and draws our nation into distant and perilous adventures. He was trying to smooth the way after the war, the divisive war in Vietnam. Since the first Gulf War, our military forces have had the support of the American people. We have been seen as a necessary specialized component, manned by courageous, competent, and selflessly loyal, to the point of death, too many young Americans paid the supreme sacrifice. He personally saw the power of the American soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines, and Coast Guardsmen in peace and war, and in tough times and good times, at the top and at the bottom. And he helped create many of the serving top leaders in today's Army. For example, when he was the superintendent, General Bob Cohn, commanding the Training and Doctrine Command, Lieutenant General Vince Brooks, commanding 3rd Army, Lieutenant General John Campbell, now the G3 of the Army, and Major General Heidi Brown, down at Huntsville and Space and Missile Command, all graduated from West Point when he was the superintendent. By the way, there's countless more I'm not going to mention. I think if he were here today commenting on the national scene, he might reflect on the need for political consensus based on mutual trust and respect, and the national needs, not partisan ideology, but on solving domestic problems and addressing the demands of U.S. leadership in the international world. And for those of us in the military, I think we could have expected a gentle reminder that we must be seen as instruments of national power and not simply another interest group. Simply stated, General Andrew Goodpaster lived a life characterized by the motto of his beloved West Point, duty, honor, country. And I am proud to say I knew him and am very honored to receive this award today. And I want to thank all of you who supported this lunch and who came here today for your support of the ideals represented by the Marshall Foundation, General Andrew Goodpaster, Lieutenant General Brent Scowcroft, and the entire legacy of those who are willing to say, not for myself, but for my country. I can't tell you how proud I am. But those who made me what I am, many are in this room, and those I tried to serve for my entire adult life. Thanks a lot.
That is a wonderful man. I just have a couple of comments before we go on to the rest of our day, and that is, this award means something. This event matters, and it means so much more today because we got to honor General Gordon Sullivan. Thank you so much for coming. Thanks for allowing me to be the Master of Ceremonies, and have a wonderful day. Thank you.